Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you so much to the Cleveland Public Library for co-hosting this event with us. My name is Leila Atassi, and I cover Cleveland City Hall for the Northeast Ohio Media Group. I'm joined here with Councilman Joe Cimperman, who represents Ward 3, which spans both east and west of the river and includes downtown. About 15,000 Clevelanders call downtown home, and city officials estimate that at the current pace, the city is on track to welcome another 10,000 residents to downtown within the next 6 or 7 years. And Joe Cimperman has told me that 25,000 is the magic number. That's when retailers considering opening locations. That's when schools start to crop up. That's when a district really becomes a neighborhood. So tonight we're asking the questions. Who lives downtown and what do they want? So, Councilman, I'd like to start just by asking you to talk a little bit about downtown's evolution. How has the district gotten to where it is today? And how would you describe the ebb and flow of population over the years?
Sure, thank you. And thanks to the Northeast Ohio Media Group for hosting this. This is a fantastic turnout. And when Leila and I were talking a little bit about this, one of my first experiences downtown now almost 18 years ago as a candidate was when we had a debate at the old House of Q's, and we actually had more people who were running for city council than we had residents who were attending the debate.
Wow.
So kudos to everybody here. That doesn't happen anymore. And we're joined tonight by people from the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, the Historic Warehouse District, Historic Gateway, and Downtown Cleveland residents. And I think for me, the biggest evolutionary moment happened prepositionally between 3 different mayors. Mayor White, who was such a supporter of downtown, and whether people liked him or not, he really got the residential piece of it and really pushed for it with legislation and financial support. Back then it was downtown versus the neighborhoods. And you hear that sometimes from my colleagues on council and other people. It became then a question during Mayor Campbell's administration of downtown or the neighborhoods, or downtown and the neighborhoods. And I really feel that when Mayor Jackson came in, first as council president and then as mayor, he really started to say things like downtown neighborhoods. And as a writer, you know this, as people who are in a library know this, Director Felton Thomas knows this, words matter. And when you saw more people walking their dogs, you saw more people with strollers, more people started to say things to me like, we need more of these amenities, you started to see that moment change when it wasn't corporate housing alone, and it wasn't just people who were here, whether they were single or waiting to have kids and then move out, but people were staying here longer. And I've seen that, and now with Chester Commons, the new dog park, and what's happening in downtown, you just kind of feel like there's not just a momentum for the commercial and the more high-end development side, but for residents as well, and to me that's an indication of a downtown's true strength.
Although now we're starting to see that rhetoric sort of crop back up. Some of your council colleagues have routinely put out the criticism that the city does a lot for downtown and then tends to ignore the neighborhoods on the fringes. How would you react to that kind of mentality?
Well, I often say at City Hall, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I say that respectfully because when you look at the numbers, what the Jackson administration, and I can only go by the last 8 years in terms of funding, has spent, it's about 10% to what it's spent in the surrounding neighborhoods. Now people are like, well that sounds a lot different than what people are saying, recognizing that you've got 35 other neighborhoods around there. I will tell you that the neighborhoods of Tremont, Detroit Shoreway, Ohio City, Flats Forward, St. Clair Superior benefit greatly by what's happening downtown. And you see more people bicycling, and can I just say this, how do I say this respectfully and in a library? If people think you can have a great city without having a great downtown, they're reading a different history book than the one that I know. Do I think there are moments where we need to have economic parity in the city? Do I think we absolutely need to spend more money in the neighborhood where I grew up in St. Clair Superior and Glenville and other places for little kids like who are in the room right now? Absolutely. But we can't neglect something that we have hundreds of thousands of people working and visiting, now close to 15,000 people living there, and in my opinion, we have to continue the momentum, because I'll say this, I remember 1997, which was like a huge hangover. We had the bicentennial, happy birthday to Cleveland, everyone is having a great time, You saw the flats tank, you saw numbers downtown not be what they should be, and instead of this roller coaster of development and housing growth, you've really started to see, I think, a more level trajectory just in terms of the new housing development that's happening, the work that's going on, more projects that are coming on board, more historic conversions, and I tend to think that's a good indication of the health of the city. We have to keep it going past the RNC in 2016.
Mm-hmm. So how would you define the current, or how would you describe the current demographic of downtown? And how is the diversity, racially, ethnically, socioeconomically? Is downtown a real melting pot? And if not, who is missing from the downtown social landscape?
Well, you know, people, when they think of downtown, you know, sometimes don't remember that we've got a 150 unit of public housing called Bone Tower on East 12th Street. St. Clair Place is a senior subsidized living. Winton Manor is as well. Park Place is as well. We have housing for people who need housing, and then we've got, you know, the amazing amenities of the Warehouse District and East 9th Street, and really where I think we need to start focusing on more is workforce housing. Mm-hmm. You know, if I were to want to live downtown with my family, or you as a writer, or, you know, folks who are working in the restaurants or teachers, it's a little bit challenging to find that middle housing. And back in _98, we tried this great experiment, which people thought was crazy, where we actually, the city of Cleveland, created a subsidized form of rent control on the on the Bridgeview apartments, and we subsidized 10% by adjusting the percentages of loans, and the developer was really mad. And he basically said, you know, it's like I'm in you know, East Germany, you're telling me how to live, this is communism, and all the other things. And what ended up happening was, because of that subsidy, they were able to fill housing with people who were working class African American, writers, taxi cab drivers, restaurant people, and it created a real feeling of community in that neighborhood. And you can ask John Carney about that now, that when we had to get rid of the subsidy for a lot of reasons at the city, he actually said he was sad because he saw how well it worked in terms of keeping his tenancy, right? I mean, I'll say this to people, you know, I grew up in the city, I grew up in a family where English was a second language, I grew up on a street where white people were in the minority. To me, that's life. That's the city. People don't want to live downtown because it looks like a Westlake subdivision, right? Or a gated community. You want that mix. And where I'm hoping to focus on is, we've got great opportunities for people who are older and maybe need something closer to public housing and subsidized housing. You've got great opportunities for people over here. We got to start working on more stuff in the middle, because I think that's when you're going to see people staying downtown longer. And the old rhetoric about people not staying in the city anymore because of schools, I don't know what statistics they're looking at. My daughter goes to Campus International, Cleveland Public School. There's phenomenal charter schools all around the community. If you don't want to live downtown because you want to go to a suburban community, God bless you. But it's harder for people to say they're leaving because of the schools. Because I'll tell you right now, my daughter, who's smarter than me, is getting a better education than I did as a kid.
So what are you mentioned workforce housing, the availability of that. What are the barriers to developing that?
Sure.
Can they be overcome?
Well, you know, Michelle Jarboe knows, Tom Strinsky knows, people in the room know, it's still very expensive to develop per square foot downtown. And whether we're talking about historic conversions or new construction, I don't know that we've gotten to that point yet where it's easy without city subsidy. Fred Geist tried it on his own because of part of the community benefits project on the 9, and he actually has some apartments that are moderately priced. I think there's more opportunities, especially on the periphery of downtown, and a lot of people look at downtown from maybe East 9th to West 9th, or maybe even a little bit more liberally from West 10th Street all the way to East 18th, which is the special improvement district boundaries. I tend to think of it from the inner belt to the river. And I think if we look at downtown that way, we've got a lot of opportunities for housing where we could do some of that mixed income housing, and I think people would really respond to it. You can walk to places, right? Between the 100 of us here, I just got the liquor license application from Heinen's. I asked, when is it happening? They said probably in the first 2 months of next year, right? That's great. So there's a grocery store. There's one called Constantino's on the west side. You can walk, you can bike, you can do things like get out and experience life. And how do we create more amenities for people who maybe aren't making a lot of money, or for people who are looking for a place to start out? And I think that's where the sweet spots are for downtown, at least in the next 8 quarters or 12 quarters.
You were talking earlier about the diversity of downtown residents that people might not be aware of, but then there's also the perception that downtown is really an entertainment district.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would, and how do downtown residents feel about that distinction?
Well, before the committee hearing today that we had at City Council, I was in a pretty heated conversation between 5 bar owners and 5 residents. And every one of the residents is a homeowner. They're not, renters. They own their condo, and they're upset because of the noise. And the conversation came up from someone, I'm not going to out anybody, but one of the bar owners said, well, you knew what you were moving into.
Oh.
And I said, you know what? That isn't helpful.
Yeah.
Because downtown is continuing to evolve, and we want more people living here so more places are more successful. But, Leila, I'll say this to you, it happened on Friday. I got a phone call from a resident on the east side of downtown who was complaining because the dumpster company was there again at 3 in the morning. I call this dumpster company and I'm like, are you aware that you're underneath 50 people's windows? And it's like, it's still this education. We're getting better, but I think that we still need to continue to have that dialogue in terms of you can't just apply the old rules anymore.
So one of the key questions we want to discuss today is for young professionals who are living downtown, what would keep them in downtown 10 years from now when they decide to raise families? What will keep them here? So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges. What are the quality of life issues that have to be addressed before families would feel completely comfortable in the downtown district?
I think, one of the things, that I think about are parks and green space. And while I'm really proud of the development that the city has done and grateful to Mayor Jackson for the help with things like Chester Commons Perk Park and the malls, we still have a curfew at Chester Commons, right? And I'm not going to name any names, but a TV station in town did a big story about what are those people doing in that green space after 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Well, it's their front yard. I mean, these are residents who live all around Chester Commons, and it's almost like the city has to catch up to that. I think we need to absolutely create more connections, whether it's to the towpath trail, whether it's to Whiskey Island, whether it's through bicycling, and also to let people know about the amenities that are available, like in schools like Campus International, near West Intergenerational School, schools like the School of the Arts, right? There are incredible opportunities for young kids to go to school. You don't have to just go to a Catholic school like my parents sent me to in Cleveland, or move to the burbs and pay high property taxes and go to public school, because we have that. But I still think we have to create that environment where young families feel they're safe. There's still a perception of safety. And you and I were having this conversation before. I look at 2 bookends. There was a really painful moment about maybe 10 years ago where a woman was run over by a car, an accident, by 4 kids who were joyriding. It was horrific. It shouldn't have happened. And I still think about her and her family every day, because it was a life cut short and other lives that were ruined forever. We got caught so flat-footed in terms of responding to crime. Is it safe for people from the suburbs to come here? Is it safe for older people? Is there pedestrian safety? You go forward a couple years, and we had another really bad incident, and I'm so grateful to the paper, to the Plain Dealer for doing this when it did it. This is before NEOMG, but there was a robbery in Chester Commons before it was reconstructed, and you saw the evening headlines on all the news stations that, downtown is a jungle, it's running wild, keep your families at home, locked under, blanket and key. And the paper did a story and it compared downtown to other neighborhoods and other suburban communities, and it factually proved that downtown was safer. It was a Sunday front page story. And the city's response was better, and the community's response was better. And it's not to say that you had 2 horrific tragedies, but I saw a very different aftermath in both horrible things. And I think people recognize that you don't want anything to happen anywhere, but when you look at it in the aggregate, downtown is actually really working and striving toward that. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is, I think when the mayor redeployed the downtown services unit, there are more police officers downtown than there ever have been, right? Now, some people don't like that, but there's a direct correlation in terms of visibility. The other thing is the special improvement district. And as much as I love the Browns and they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, and as much as I love my Indians and my Cavs, go LeBron, there's nothing, in my opinion, that's been more important than seeing the Special Improvement District get formed, because it changes the perceptions of people who live and work and visit downtown, that it is clean and it is safe. And to me, those are things that are things that we're always trying to improve upon, but things that I think absolutely show a different perspective than some people may have.
Recently, I called you and you were out with residents, walking the streets of downtown.
Yes.
And taking and sort of cataloging all of the broken sidewalks and other nuisances that,
Yes.
why are those things more likely to be overlooked in the downtown neighborhood versus elsewhere?
Well, I have the fortune of representing Ohio City and Tremont and the Stockyards Clark Metro neighborhood, as well as downtown and a portion of St. Clair. Between Ohio City, Tremont, and the Stockyards neighborhood, they have collectively about 35 block clubs. So there is a very different governing model. And sometimes people are like, what's a block club? Well, it's the group that you go to when you need things like advice on zoning. Do we support fill in the blank? A new restaurant or bar wants to come in. Do you support this liquor license? We're talking about creating a new dynamic for a business. And so in those neighborhoods, you've almost got more of an instant, you better fix this, City Hall. And I think downtown, and I say this like I've got to, and I put this on myself, we have to improve the civic quotient, right? And that goes for everything. It goes for, you're starting to see real improvement, and people like Joe Giuliano and Mark Giuliano, who are in the audience, have been huge proponents of this, but we need to get more people who live downtown voting, right? It matters to public officials. People look at that. People don't want to admit it, but it matters, right? And it needs to have a more cohesive voice. And the more we can get residents engaged in, hey, this pole's been busted for a year, or this fire hydrant needs fixed, or we've got this cracked sidewalk, you'll start to see those improvements that you see in other places. I'm also very honestly going to say this to you. I love the fact that the Republicans are coming in 16 because it creates such a panic attack at City Hall. I'm like, oh my God, Republicans are going to trip on the sidewalk. So I'm hoping that maybe that'll encourage more activity. But we try to, because I worry about Democrats tripping too. But we just have to kind of figure out how to kind of keep that civic quotient growing and going. And I will tell you, we've said this a couple times today in different audiences, but I would have never thought we were having this conversation in this room right now, even 3 years ago, about downtown.
Oh, really?
Really.
I want to talk about green space again. Public Square obviously is on its way. Before 2016, probably. The lakefront is being reimagined.
Yes.
But are those planned green spaces enough? And could there be a better use for the malls, for instance? What is your feeling on, I know that there was a lot of debate also about the housing that's being developed on the lakefront. Does that preclude members of the general public from using the green space or using the boardwalk or using the public spaces? Is there even just an unspoken rule that that's for the people who live in that area and don't dare go enjoy the lake as a member of the public? What are your thoughts on will it be enough? Will there be enough space for use?
Well, one of the things is, and we're, and Michelle Jarboe is going to kill me, but we are going to be seeing legislation pretty soon on a modified lakefront plan by Dick Pace. The hotel is not going to go where it was originally proposed between the Rock Hall and the Science Center, right? It shouldn't. It would have blocked the view shed, right? Steve Litt was right. People were really concerned about it. There's still a market demand for a hotel. It may go near where Dock 32 is and 28 behind the Brown Stadium. But one of the things that I've been concerned about is Voinovich Park has become, for a lot of different groups and organizations, a real public space and a place to actually enjoy the lakefront. Now, we have to be candid here. In the context of this conversation, we're dealing with a real game changer with Brian Zimmerman at the Metro Parks. Right? We have a nickname for him at City Hall, and we call him the Honey Badger, because he goes and goes and goes and goes. You've got an activated Edgewater for the first time in decades. He's gonna bust through to Whiskey Island. There will be connections, and I keep saying to people, let's not forget the flats, because we talk about a green city on a blue lake. It's the verdant valley. Right? The use on the Scranton towpath is amazing. Now as it starts to wind through Tremont and get connected, Lenny Stover's idea with the Rotary Club, with the Red Line Greenway, is going to actually connect people from Tower City over through the flats, through Ohio City, Tremont, along the Rapid Line, all the way to Detroit Shoreway. So should we have a giant park on West 3rd Street where the surface parking lots are? That might be a great idea in some people's mind. I don't know that the market can bear it. What can I do to create more connections, though, to these things that are literally 5 minutes away? You know, one of the indications for me about our strength is when I would go home, I go home over the Detroit Superior Bridge, I used to just go there and you wouldn't see anybody at 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Now you see people running. Right? These aren't the lawyers at Jones Day that are working off their aggression at lunchtime. These are people that live downtown or in Ohio City that are looping on the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge in Detroit Superior, and you're seeing more and more of them. More people are bicycling. How do I know that? I'm getting complaints about there's glass gravel in the bike lanes for people when they're coming over the bridges. Those are all like canaries in the gold mine, in my opinion, of use and of a different kind of downtown than when, people would put on their fedora, get their overcoat on, go to work 8 to 5, have a scotch, and go home on the freeway. People aren't doing that anymore, and I'm seeing a different generation, and the city has to just get out of its own way and keep up with it. And I say that to myself.
How about bikeability? That I know you've had a couple victories in that realm. Talk about that a little bit and what is next for. I know that there's a very strong community of bicyclists that care deeply about those issues. So what's ahead?
Well, we had a chance a couple months ago. We drove to Indianapolis, and when I say that to some people, they yawn. But I will tell you right now, Mayor Greg Ballard has made bikeability a key part of his administration. He's a moderate Republican in a moderately Republican city. And I asked him, I said, did you do it because of equity, right? So I'm thinking, did you do it because less people can afford cars? Did you do it because if you look at statistics in America, more people of color, African-American people, and people who speak Spanish, people who don't have a lot of money, are using bicycles? And he looked at me and he said, Joe, my side of the aisle doesn't look at that. He said, but I've got Lilly here, which is a pharmaceutical development company headquartered there. I've got Angie's List. He goes, I want young people to see Indianapolis as a place they want to live in. And he saw bikeability as a means of that. They are currently developing their 78th mile of bike lane. And so the thing for me that was really interesting was when we were on the bike lanes, because I got on the bike and I was actually wearing this suit. I looked like Mary Poppins. And we're going on the bike lanes, and we saw development happening in neighborhoods that wasn't happening because of the bike lanes. For me, downtown, that's even more important because less people are driving, right? We've got to continually work with the Ohio Department of Transportation on ODOT and ODOT for public transit, but I think we absolutely have to put more bike lanes down, and they have to be more dedicated. And I'm hoping that we can continue working on a plan that would connect Zone Rec from Detroit Shoreway, Councilman Zone's vision, all the way down Lorraine Avenue, over the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge to Progressive Field, and at one dedicated bike lane that people could use. We've seen that when you do stuff like that, more people bike, more trails get built. And with the towpath trail and everything that's happening on our western border in the flats, I tend to think that it's coming, and other cities are showing what an important thing it can be, and we have to be more, we have to grab it more.
Joe, would you say that your children one day would live downtown? Why or why not?
Besides the fact that their mom and dad have banned them from leaving the house, just kidding. My kids are city kids. We drive through downtown a lot, and I want them to see that there's a life here for them. I grew up on East 74th in St. Clair. My mom was born in Slovenia. We went downtown because for her, it made her feel connected to Europe. But for me, as a kid who grew up in the city and has lived in the city his whole life, went away for 2 years and came back, we have such a beautiful city, and we have such beautiful, caring people. And yeah, we've got our flaws and we've got our hurdles, but I like living in a city that's still becoming. I have friends who live in Boston and New York and San Francisco. The quality of life is great. Their ability to afford it is not so great. And for me, I just want this city to be a place where my kids feel that it's as chic and cool to live in as Portland, Oregon. And we have our own, incredibleness. And I don't want to be another city, but I keep thinking, it's the best question, how do we make our next generation feel that this is a place for them as well? I hope the schools contribute to that. I think Cleveland State contributes to that. I think if we can grow our job sector, that contributes to that. But it's all, there's no silver bullet. It's something that we have to do in totem. And I'm just hoping that we can get to a point where we see those generations staying here longer and not thinking they have to move to another place. I think we're getting there. if you go to any of the surrounding neighborhoods, you meet a lot of people who've moved back. And that's the other cool thing I think downtown has going for it. People don't have to move to Lakewood or Cleveland Heights or Shaker Heights anymore to have a yard. You can go to Detroit Shorey or Ohio City or Tremont. You can go to St. Clair Superior. You can go to Glenville. You can, even move around University Circle. And my hope is that more people see it as downtown is a place for them to enjoy, live in, recreate. But if you do decide to move, you don't have to leave the city. You can still use downtown and maybe make room for the next generation of people who want to live here.
We started off by saying that 25,000 is the golden number for population for downtown to be considered a legit neighborhood. Is Cleveland's downtown going to reach that?
Yes.
Why do you think so?
I think so because I think a lot of people who want to move the city forward have gotten addicted to the momentum. We know what it's like to go halfway up the mountain, right? We had bicentennial-itis. We don't want to go there again. And Heinen's is going to open and Heinen's is going to thrive, right? And we're going to see more development on surface parking lots. And the Stark project, Nucleus, is going to happen. And I think we're just going to continue to grow. My concern is, and I feel this all the time, is we can't ever be satisfied. And I feel that a lot of the private sector is saying we got to keep developing, keep figuring it out, whether it's the Huntington building or May Company, or whether we decide what we're going to do with the 3rd District Police Station. I mean, to go out as far as East 21st, East 22nd, and look at it that way and start to see downtown as not just, a series of numbered streets between East 9th and West 9th, but literally between the Interbelt and West 25th Street, we could hit that magic number. And if you listen to Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Joe Marinucci was quoted as saying a few days ago that he thinks we're going to hit that 25,000 number based on current growth patterns by 2021, 2022. Which for me, if we're talking about 1997, 1998, if you would have said that back then, you'd have said in 20 years we're going to be there, I'd have been like, you are writing a fantasy that I can't see, but you start to see it now and you can feel it now, and we have to continue to capitalize on that momentum.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe. I want to bring Michelle JarboeMcPhee up here. Michelle is a business reporter for The Plain Dealer. She's not only an expert on downtown real estate and development, but she is also someone who has chosen to live downtown herself.
When I first came to interview at The Plain Dealer for my job 7 years ago, I remember an editor who will remain nameless told me not to walk from 18th and Superior back to the Wyndham Hotel at 5 o'clock because something bad might happen to me. And downtown was dangerous. I can't imagine anybody saying that to me today, 7 years later, almost to the month. Over the past few years, I've written about the residential growth of downtown. I wrote about the recession and then the resurgence. And I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who live downtown. Since one of the priorities tonight was to discuss who is living downtown, I thought it might be interesting to note, without names, the stories of a few people that I've talked to over the past couple of years. So I'm going to rely on my notes a little bit here. So last year, when I was writing a story about Heinen's, I talked to a retired couple that bought a warehouse district condominium a few years ago after living in a downtown apartment for decades. The wife actually had lived downtown for roughly 40 years, and her husband had moved downtown about 30 years ago. She likes the proximity to the theaters at Playhouse Square, to the library, to restaurants, to other amenities. He says they don't have to shovel snow or rake leaves or cut grass. And they were very excited about the new Heinen's store, which is set to open this spring, and they wish there were more places to shop downtown. I talked to a reverse commuter in her early 60s who drives an hour south to go to work from downtown because at some point here she's expecting to retire and she'd rather live in the city. She sold her suburban house a few years ago and rents an apartment near East 4th Street. She doesn't want the upkeep of a house, and she'd been coming downtown to eat and go out already. I interviewed a 20-something professional who moved here from out of state to work for the Cleveland Cavaliers and started out with a studio apartment in a building on Euclid Avenue. He later upgraded to a one-bedroom apartment. I talked to a whole bunch of Quicken Loans employees who were moving out of their parents' suburban basements in order to be in apartments where they could walk home after spending long hours in the call center over at Tower City. And I've interviewed people with kids. So there are people with kids who live downtown. I don't know if the people here with kids live downtown. Yeah, a few hands back there. So one of the couples I talked to was a couple in their late 30s, early 40s who had their first baby after buying a downtown condo on Public Square. I see school-age children from time to time in my building, and I got an email today from a downtown worker who has 2 children under the age of 2 and wants to stay downtown. So I think that illustrates the diversity of people who are interested in being downtown and staying downtown. My husband and I moved here 2 years ago. We were living on Shaker Square, and before that we lived in Cleveland Heights. I work downtown, he's self-employed. I was in night school at Cleveland State University and was tired of walking to Tower City from CSU to take the Rapid to go home at 10 o'clock at night. We were used to living in a neighborhood where we could walk and take public transportation. I wanted less of a commute. We wanted a better apartment. We live over at Tower Press in a loft on Superior Avenue. We have 1 car, which we trade off as needed. I walk to work at Tower City, which I'm not looking forward to doing in February. And I sometimes take the free RTA trolley home, which if you haven't used it, there are 4 of them. They're great, please tell people about them. Our rent is higher than it was out on Shaker Square, but we're saving on gas and car insurance. We're saving time without a long commute or home maintenance obligations. And we're preserving our mobility, which is something that's particularly important to people in their 20s and 30s who have grown up in an uncertain work world, and when you're in journalism is a good thing. We're interested in hearing your stories, and we are going to have 2 cameras set up toward the back of these tables here. One of them, people will be asking you who you are and why you live downtown. The other will be a question about what needs to happen in order to keep you downtown. Joe and Leila talked about some of the issues: workforce housing, schools, amenities, retail. If there are other things you think we should know about, let us know.